Hello again, ladies and gents, and welcome to another Two Truths Meg review. If you love deep, respectful Lord of the Rings discussions, that's exactly what this channel is built around. Today, I'll be choosing the single greatest line from every major character in the greatest trilogy of all time, The Lord of the Rings. A few weeks ago, I looked at every character's greatest scene, but this time we're narrowing it down to dialogue. Not the biggest moment, not the most important scene, just the one line that best captures the character, hits the hardest, or stands above the rest. The rules are simple. The character has to be named, and they need to have at least two distinct lines of dialogue across at least two different scenes. So with that said, let's get started and see which of our favorite lines makes the list. Ireless, it is as the Lord Denethor predicted, long has he foreseen this doom. For Ireless, the options are pretty limited, but this line stands out because it gives us a little more insight into Denethor. This shows how much Denethor's sense of doom has influenced the people around him, and it adds to the hopeless feeling hanging over Minas Tirith. Shagrat, the scum tried to knife me. Kill him. Had Gorbag simply fallen and caused this mess, maybe a mini civil war may have been avoided, but Shagrat instigated all the others and absolute chaos followed. Barliman Butterbur, not seen him for 6 months. I've always found this line kind of funny, and it feels like one of the closest moments to the Butterbur we get in the books. Frodo and the hobbits have just escaped the Nazgul and finally reached what feels like a temporary safe haven. Butterbur seems like he's finally remembering Gandalf, and for a second you might think he actually might be there, but then he just casually crushes all of Frodo's hopes with not seeing him for 6 months. It's such a silly, abrupt way to deliver terrible news. Madril, if you let them go, your life will be forfeit. As Faramir finally recognizes why he must let Frodo and Sam go, Madril is sort of that last little voice pulling him in the other direction. There's no maliciousness in Madril reminding Faramir. I think it's actually coming from genuine concern for Faramir's well-being, but it's a line that helps us realize what Faramir is giving up in letting them go. Freda, I don't want to go. Seeing this little actress deliver that line with real tears and appearing truly distressed, it just hurts your heart. Celeborn, tell me where is Gandalf, for I much desire to speak with him. Okay, to be honest, a certain 20-year-old music video is heavily influencing me here. When I watch that video, man, I'm just amazed that this line fits right in line with the song. Very impressive. Hama, your staff. Hama's a smart guy, so I have to think he knows Gandalf's staff is more than just a walking stick, but it's pretty clear he's no fan of Wormtongue, and when he asks for it, he almost seems to do it half-heartedly. It feels like he's following orders, but not really trying hard to stop Gandalf either. Ugluk, looks like meat's back on the menu, boys. Probably the best line from any orc or orcai in the entire trilogy, or any villain really. It doesn't hold much weight with the overall story or anything, but it's such great timing, delivered perfectly and pretty iconic now at this point. Grishnach, what about their legs? They don't need those. Again, nothing super special about this line other than it really shows how creepy and desperate this orc is in getting a meal out of Merry and Pippin. Morrowind, I will find you there. I'm not sure she believed she would actually survive this raid and find her children again, but in an urgent attempt to comfort her children and have them leave, what else could this loving mother say? Gamling, your men, my lord, will follow you to whatever end. In this moment, King Théoden is having some serious self-doubt, which I feel he struggles with often throughout the trilogy. Here, Gamling reassures Théoden that everyone will follow his lead to whatever fate lies ahead, be it victory or death. King of the dead, none but the King of Gondor may command me. I know, the way is shut is probably the more famous line, but I like this one more because of what it does for Aragorn. Up to this point, we've been told throughout the entire trilogy that Aragorn is the heir to Isildur and the rightful King of Gondor, but this is one of those first moments where we actually see what that means. The King of the Dead says that none but the King of Gondor may command him, and then Aragorn steps forward and proves that he can. It's a great reminder that Aragorn isn't just carrying a title or a bloodline. He really is the king. Gorbag, this fellow ain't dead. I love this line for two reasons. First, what a relief it was for me as a 10-year-old kid learning that Frodo wasn't dead. He was in a deep sleep. That sure put my mind at ease. Second, this shows how knowledgeable Gorbag is. He knows from a simple look that Frodo is alive, suggesting that Gorbag has a lot of experience around Shelob's lair, and the fact that he survived despite constantly being near Shelob's lair shows his competency. Éowyn, yes mama. As a parent, this one hits a little differently. Éowyn is probably only 12 or 13 years old, and yet when his mother tells him to get himself and his sister to safety, there's no arguing, no hesitation, and no frightened look on his face. Just complete trust, obedience, and confidence that he can do what she's asking. I mean, how proud would you be to see your son respond like that in a moment like this? Lurtz, Saruman. Lurtz has very little dialogue, so there isn't a ton to choose from, but this one still feels pretty epic. When Saruman asks who he serves, Lurtz doesn't hesitate at all. He just immediately declares his absolute allegiance to Saruman, and that moment leads right into the montage of the Uruk-hai preparing for battle. It's simple, intense, and honestly kind of the perfect line for a character like Lurtz. Haldir, long ago we fought and died together. We come to honor that allegiance. Haldir is alluding to the ancient days back when men and elves fought together on the steps of Mount Doom in an attempt to defeat Sauron. I know he's quoting someone else here as he mentions that he's bringing word from Elrond, but even though those technically aren't his words, you can feel that he means every word. He is proud to stand alongside men once again to fight for the freedom of Middle-earth. Which king? I will break him. I initially wanted to choose Shire Baggins, but I don't actually know for sure if that's the Witch King saying it, since there are 8 other Nazgul it could have been. So instead, I went with this line from this conversation with Gothmog before the siege of Minas Tirith. Gothmog brings up Gandalf as a real concern, and the Witch King simply responds, I will break him. And while we know that ultimately doesn't happen, it does foreshadow him breaking Gandalf's staff and briefly overpowering him. It's also just a line that sends chills down your spine. The way his cold, hollow, almost deathly voice delivers those words makes it feel less like a threat and more like a promise. Arwen, if you want him, come and claim him. Before the chase from the Nazgul begins, Arwen tells Aragorn that she does not fear the Wraiths. At the Ford of Bruinen, Arwen shows she truly doesn't fear them, as she declares to the Wraiths to basically come and take Frodo if they dare. Here she is, completely outnumbered 1 to 9. They demand she give up Frodo, and rather than show any fear, she basically dares them to try, and we all know how that ended for them. Sauron Zigur. Sauron's was a tricky one to pick because there's just so few lines and much of his are in black speech. But the one I chose is when Frodo and Gandalf are in Bag End discussing the One Ring and Sauron's connection to it. After Frodo says Sauron was destroyed, we hear the black speech whisper of Sauron. Now, I don't know black speech, so I had to search a bit online, and this Reddit thread was really fun to read. Basically what I gathered is that Sauron here whispers Zigur, which some believe translates to something like wizard or sorcerer. Some interpret this as Sauron declaring that he's the sorcerer, but I like the different take that this is Sauron being aware of Gandalf, saying Zigur, letting Gandalf know that he's keeping an eye on him and is actively making plans to reclaim the ring. The meaning behind this is pretty fun to speculate, but even without knowing the meaning, the simple black speech whisper in Bag End that both Gandalf and Frodo heard is enough to give you the chills. Gothmog, the time of the orc has come. Gothmog has plenty of memorable moments, but when it comes to his best line, this one easily takes the cake. As the armies of Mordor overtake Osgiliath, Gothmog basically declares that the Age of Men is coming to an end and that the time of the orc has arrived. It's such a chilling line because it makes Sauron's final push feel real. This isn't just another battle anymore, this is Sauron trying to take Middle-earth for good. Éomer, I am sorry. While To the King is much more memorable and an easy pick, justifiably so, the more subtle line of him apologizing to our 3 hunters just hits a bit deeper, at least for me. Up to this point, Éomer still doesn't entirely trust our companions, but once he sees the sadness and disappointment on their face, once they realize that Merry and Pippin were likely killed by him and his men, you can see how truly sorry he is. Think about it, up to this point, we've only seen a tough and stern Éomer. Here, we see a more somber Éomer, who feels and understands others' sadness. His apology sort of humanizes him a bit, and you can tell his apology is real by him giving the hunters 2 horses. Wormtongue, like a morning of pale spring, still clinging to winter's chill. Something about this line always was intriguing somehow. As Wormtongue is attempting to poison Éowyn's mind in her grief, he makes a metaphor, one that is so tangible. He's clearly infatuated with Éowyn's beauty and describes it as a beauty of spring. But because she's in such a sad and depressed, lonely and helpless state, there's a coldness to her, as a spring still not yet fully recovered from the winter. I love this line because it immediately puts me in the outdoors that I've experienced, making this line once again tangible and perfect in describing Éowyn's state. Saruman, your love of the halfling's leaf has clearly slowed your mind. For Saruman, I chose a bit more of a comical line for his best. When Gandalf is finally confiding to Saruman the whereabouts of the One Ring, Saruman makes a slight to Gandalf that smoking pipeweed has taken an effect on Gandalf's wits. What makes it even more ironic is at the end of the Two Towers, we see that Saruman himself has his own personal stash of Longbottom leaf, so he clearly enjoys the smoking of pipeweed too. Treebeard, it is likely that we go to our doom. Treebeard always gets me emotional on this scene, and a big part of that is because of this line. We know that the Ents are a dying species. Their eventual extinction is inevitable. However, Treebeard and the other Ents are willing to risk expediting their extinction by confronting Saruman and the armies in Isengard. Really think about what Treebeard says. He believes the odds are not in their favor, that they may not make it out of this battle alive, and they are willing to still face this reality to do what is right. Faramir, you wonder what his name is monologue. Now I won't read the whole thing, but you can see it here. Faramir's is a long one. It's more of a little speech than a single line. When he first encounters Frodo and Sam and his suspicions of their intentions, he gives deep insight into what war brings. Here is a dead man laying before him, and he wonders what brought him to this point. Was he really evil? What was he told to convince him to march against Gondor? Did he have a family he would have rather stayed with? Not only does it make us as an audience ponder and reflect more about the true individual consequences of war, but makes us realize Faramir is a deep thinker, not just a warrior. Elrond, put aside the ranger, become who you are born to be. We know Aragorn is the king of Gondor. All he needs to do is accept that mantle and lead his people. He promises to Boromir as he's dying that he will not let Minas Tirith fall, but up to this point in this journey, he has yet to fully accept his destiny still. It isn't until Elrond shows up and, almost like a father trying to get through to a stubborn child, tells him that it's time to buck up and do what he knows is right. And in doing so, Aragorn finally accepts his mantle as King of Gondor. Legolas, they're taking the hobbits to Isengard. I'm actually kidding. While I'd love to choose this line as Legolas's best, I actually believe his greatest line is at the Black Gate. As Gimli states he thought he'd never die side by side with an elf, Legolas says, "What about side by side with a friend?" It's one of those few moments when Legolas is being very soft, sentimental, and showing his true feelings without downplaying them with humor. And it also reminds us just how these two used to see each other as enemies and now are the best of friends. Bilbo, there's always been a Baggins living here under the hill in Bag End, and there always will be. This is one of those lines that hits harder after you've seen the entire trilogy, and probably even more so after several rewatches. At the very beginning, Bilbo is simply reminiscing about the Shire, his home, and his life in Bag End. On the surface, it feels like a completely normal statement. There's always been a Baggins living there, passed down from one generation to the next. But then he quietly adds, and there always will be. And that's where the line becomes a little heartbreaking, because we know that won't be the case. Bilbo and Frodo both eventually will sail to the Undying Lands, and Bag End won't be passed on to another Baggins. Yes, Sam inherits it, and he's absolutely worthy of it, but Bilbo's line still carries this sad bit of tragic irony. Without even knowing it, he's hinting at how deeply the ring will change the future of his family. Denethor, Boromir was loyal to me, not some wizard's pupil. As Faramir tries to tell his father that Boromir would have fallen to the ring just like anyone else, Denethor can't even consider it. Instead, he immediately defends Boromir by turning it into a matter of loyalty. To him, Boromir wasn't just a stronger son, he was a son who stayed loyal to him, while Faramir had been influenced by Gandalf. It's such a revealing line because Denethor is so blinded by pride and grief that he can't see the truth about Boromir, Faramir, or the ring itself. Éowyn, I am no man. Does this line really even need an explanation? In such a natural, non-preachy, and completely earned way, Éowyn proves her worth and finally takes down the Witch King. He believes he's untouchable because no man could kill him, but little did he know that a small hobbit and one incredibly brave woman absolutely could. It's iconic, satisfying, and easily one of the greatest and memorable lines in the entire trilogy. Gimli, that still only counts as one. Gimli's got some good lines as well, but this one is just so Gimli, always making everything competitive. And what's funny is that you get the vibe Gimli isn't just making a joke, he's dead serious. Legolas just took out this giant creature on top of what, the 30 or so Haradrim riding it? And Gimli in his competitive nature declares that Legolas can only count this epic takedown as a single kill count. I remember the entire theater laughing out loud the first time I saw this movie. Galadriel, even the smallest person can change the course of the future. Why this is Galadriel's best line is because I believe this pretty much summarizes and encapsulates a main theme in Tolkien's trilogy. And that is, anyone, no matter how significant or insignificant they may seem, can make a huge difference on the world. And for Frodo, I imagine this had to be incredibly encouraging. He wishes the ring had never come to him. He knows what he has to do and he's terrified of the road ahead. But Galadriel gives him this quiet reassurance that even someone like him can change the future and do the impossible. Gollum, follow me. There's so many lines I could have chosen for Gollum. Stupid fat hobbit, leave now and never come back, and of course, most famously, my precious. But the more I thought about it, the more I kept coming back to this one. Not only are these the final words spoken in The Two Towers, but they leave the movie on such an ominous note, with us wondering what Gollum has planned for Frodo and Sam. He has just finished that conversation between Gollum and Smeagol, where they decide that she could kill the hobbits for them. So when he turns back and says, "Follow me," there's this perfect mix of malice, excitement, and sinister anticipation in his voice. My precious is obviously and clearly the more famous line. I am not denying that. But follow me gets a top spot for me because of how perfectly it closes the second film and sets up the danger being plotted for our hobbits. Théoden, what can men do against such reckless hate? I know the script in these movies isn't always taken directly from the books, but this line still feels, at least to me, like it carries some of Tolkien's own feelings about war. Tolkien fought in World War I, and while I don't want to overstate that influence, I've always felt like in the movies, Théoden is one of those characters who most clearly reflects that weariness. Here he is, a king who has done everything he can to fight for the right cause, and yet he still finds himself staring at what feels like a certain defeat. That's what makes the line so powerful. What can men do against such reckless hate isn't just a question for Helm's Deep. It feels like a question that applies to the real world too. Sometimes hatred feels endless, irrational, and impossible to reason with, and Théoden captures that hopelessness perfectly. It's one of those lines that always makes me pause for a second, because beneath the fantasy setting, there's something very human and very real about it. Boromir, I would have followed you, my brother, my captain, my king. I've highlighted this scene a lot in my videos, and for good reason. It is one of the biggest turning points in the entire trilogy, but I don't think I've ever really talked about this specific line in enough depth. Boromir begins the journey not really trusting Aragorn and certainly not seeing him as his king, but as the fellowship continues, you can slowly see that change. He begins to see Aragorn not as some ranger from the north, but as a true leader, and that's what makes these final words so powerful. Boromir is dying, completely broken both physically and spiritually, and yet he uses his last moments to reassure Aragorn. Let's not forget, Aragorn has sort of been running from his destiny for most of his life, doubting himself and fearing the weakness in his own bloodline. So for Boromir, this hero of Gondor, to call him his brother, his captain, and finally his king as his literal last words is such a meaningful final gift. It's beautiful, heartbreaking, and incredibly sad because just as Boromir fully accepts Aragorn, his own journey comes to an end. Aragorn, I would have gone with you to the end, into the very fires of Mordor. Yet again, Aragorn is another character with so many incredible lines. There's for Frodo, his Men of the West speech, you bow to no one, and plenty more. But I chose this one because his conversation with Frodo at Amon Hen shows Aragorn at one of his most vulnerable moments. Frodo is basically offering him the ring, and Aragorn not only resists the temptation, but seems to understand Frodo's decision before Frodo even has to say it. And instead of fighting him on it, Aragorn gently accepts that Frodo has to leave. When he says he would have gone with him to the end, even into the very fires of Mordor, it doesn't feel like some empty, heroic declaration. He means it. You can see it in his eyes that he's heartbroken he won't be able to continue on with Frodo, but he also knows this is the path Frodo has to take. Pippin, what about second breakfast? This is the last character where I chose a more lighthearted line, but honestly, how could I not? At this point, Pippin still seems to think this is basically a fun hobbit walking party, and the fact that he's already worried about missing second breakfast says everything about how he's viewing this journey so far. It shows where his priorities are, how wonderfully aloof he can be, and why he brings such great comedic relief to the Fellowship. Merry, there won't be a Shire. In my video where I chose every character's greatest scene, this is the same moment I picked for Merry as his best line. Merry is trying to help Pippin see the bigger picture. Yes, they could go back to the Shire and try to wait out the rest of the war, but Merry understands that this evil isn't just going to stop at the borders of their home. They might get a few more weeks, months, or even years of peace, but eventually the war would reach them too, and that's what makes this line so powerful. Merry realizes that if they don't stand and fight now, there may not be a Shire left to go back to. That's why he's been trying so hard to convince Treebeard and the Ents to help in this great war, to preserve peace, happiness, and freedom. Sam, don't you leave him, Samwise Gamgee, and I don't mean to. I know a lot of people might be upset I didn't choose I Can Carry You. In my defense, I did choose that entire scene as Sam's greatest moment in one of my previous videos. But But when it comes to Sam's greatest line, this one hits the emotions in a different way. We first hear Sam say this to Frodo when they're still in the Shire, where we learn that he made a promise to Gandalf to never leave Frodo. Then, after the Battle of Amon Hen, Sam nearly drowns because he's stopping at nothing to go with Frodo. And when he says this line again through tears, he's trying to convey why he simply cannot let Frodo go alone. He made a promise to Gandalf, who they believe to be dead. And I'm sure Sam wants to honor that promise to the fullest extent. To fail in that promise would feel like a betrayal not only to Frodo, but especially to Gandalf, the one who sacrificed his life for him and the rest of the Fellowship. So when Sam is sitting there in the boat, shedding tears and repeating that promise, we realize he's still carrying the grief of Gandalf's death. And to honor him, Sam will keep that promise at all costs. Frodo wouldn't have got far without Sam. And how true that line really is. Sam is extremely humble. He doesn't want the credit. He's not doing this for the glory, and he's certainly not trying to be seen as some great hero. He's doing it because it's the right thing to do, because he made a promise, and because of his undying love for Frodo. But by this point in the journey, it's also very clear Frodo really wouldn't have made it this far without him. Even back in the Shire, when Frodo is tempted to put on the ring in the presence of a Nazgul, Sam stops him. When Gollum first attacks them, Sam helps overpower him, which was no easy feat. And then in Osgiliath, when the Nazgul on the Fell Beast nearly reaches Frodo, Sam risks himself again, stops Frodo from putting on the ring, and pulls him back to safety. So for Frodo to recognize that he would have failed over and over again without Sam says a lot about Frodo too. It shows his own humility, and it gives Sam this beautiful moment of appreciation that he would never ask for himself. Frodo may be the ring bearer, but even he knows he never could have carried that burden alone. Gandalf, I will not say do not weep, for not all tears are an evil. Easily, Gandalf was the hardest character to choose just one line for because there are so many powerful, iconic, and memorable options. You shall not pass. Fly, you fools. A wizard is never late. All we have to decide. The list goes on and on. But I chose this one, Gandalf's words of comfort to the four hobbits at the Grey Havens, because honestly, it just hits so hard. Here we are at the very end of this epic journey. By this point, we feel like we become part of the Fellowship ourselves. We've seen everything they've endured, we understand the love they have for each other, and we feel the pain and sadness of this final parting. I mean, just look at Merry. We never see him this broken up. There are tears everywhere, and yet Gandalf doesn't tell them to not cry. Instead, he reminds them that not all tears are an evil, and that's such a beautiful truth, not only for them, but for us in our own lives as well. Not all tears are bad. Some tears come from sadness, yes, but also from gratitude, joy, love, and the realization that we've experienced something truly special. Gandalf is reminding his dear hobbits, and really all of us, that those emotions are okay. Those tears are part of what makes the memories so meaningful in the first place, and honestly, I can't think of a better way to end this video on, because in many ways, that's what the Lord of the Rings leaves us with too. Sadness that the journey is over, gratitude that we got to experience it, and joy that these characters, these words, and this story will stay with us long after we too have parted with our beloved Fellowship.